It started like an ordinary evening on Route 99. But destiny had other plans. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in orange and red, while the low rumble of motorcycle engines echoed through the quiet town. People in the small roadside diner stiffened as a notorious biker gang rolled in, their leather jackets creaking, their boots stomping heavily on the ground. The atmosphere instantly shifted. Conversations died, coffee cups trembled slightly in nervous hands. The bikers didn't just arrive, they invaded the peace. They laughed loudly, slammed tables, and barked orders at the frightened staff like they owned the place. Anyone who dared look their way quickly looked down again. That's how fear works, loud, messy, and arrogant. Then, the door of the diner opened gently. A man stepped outside. No tattoos, no flashy clothes, no loud attitude, just calm. He wore simple jeans, worn, out boots, and a quiet expression on his face, as if chaos didn't bother him at all. His posture was steady, controlled, almost peaceful. He walked slowly toward the parking lot, not reacting to the shouting or the laughter around him. That man was Chuck Norris. Most people would panic when surrounded by trouble. Most people would hurry away or look scared. But Chuck didn't rush. He didn't even frown. His calmness wasn't weakness, it was strength. The kind you only gain through discipline, training, and experience. He nodded politely to a waitress who nervously watched, then continued toward his car. But ego never likes silence. The bikers noticed him. One smirked. Another nudged his friend. To them, he looked like an ordinary aging man, summoning they could intimidate for fun. They didn't recognize him. They didn't know who he was. And they certainly didn't understand the kind of power he carried. Not in his fists, but in his character. Engines were still roaring. Boots scraped the gravel. The leader tilted his head, eyes locked on Chuck. "Hey, Grandpa, where do you think you're going?" And in that moment, without the bikers realizing, the story of fear was about to turn into a lesson. One they would never forget. The wind carried the faint scent of gasoline and dust as the engines continued to idle like growling beasts in the parking lot. The neon lights of Route 99 diner flickered, casting shadows that stretched and shifted across the cracked pavement inside. The customers pressed closer to the windows, nervous but unable to look away. Something inside them whispered that this quiet man stepping toward his car wasn't ordinary. But the bikers didn't hear that whisper. Ego is too loud. They leaned against their roaring motorcycles, smirking with the kind of careless confidence that comes from never being challenged. Their leather jackets bore patches, scars, and emblems of a life lived intimidating others. The kind of men who believed fear was power. The kind of men who thought respect was something you forced, not something you earned. Chuck Norris walked calmly across the lot, as if the world was peaceful. No hurry in his steps, no anger in his eyes, just control. Years of discipline wrapped in silence. His movements were precise, almost graceful, like someone who knew everything happening around him without ever needing to look twice. He opened his car door quietly. That simple action was enough to offend the leader. "How rude," the man scoffed sarcastically, stepping away from his motorcycle. He was big, towering, with a heavy beard and tattoos crawling up his neck. "We show up, everyone notices. Everyone steps aside. Everyone pays respect." He jabbed his thumb toward Chuck. "Except this guy." The others laughed. The kind of laughter meant to humiliate. They loved scenes. They loved eyes on them. They loved proving dominance. Chuck didn't respond. He didn't even glance their way. And that silence burned them more than any insult could. Another biker swaggered forward, clapping mockingly. "Maybe he didn't hear you, boss. Old ears don't work so well." He snapped his fingers loudly beside Chuck's ear as if calling a pet. Still nothing. That unsettled them. Because bullies understand one language, fear. And when fear isn't returned, their confidence begins to crack. The leader stepped directly in front of Chuck now, blocking his way. The air stilled. Conversations in the diner stopped completely. The waitress near the doorway gripped the frame nervously. A truck driver paused mid-bite. Even the road itself felt quiet. "I'm talking to you," the leader growled slowly. "And when I talk, people answer." Chuck finally lifted his eyes. There was no anger, no fear, no challenge, only calm. "I'm just trying to leave," he said softly. The biker scoffed. "You leave when I say you leave." Again silence. But this silence wasn't weakness. It was control. The leader leaned closer, his breath thick with cigar smoke. "What, no shaking, no begging, no apology for ignoring me?" His eyes narrowed. "You think you're tougher than us?" Chuck shook his head gently. "I don't think about being tough. I think about being respectful." The line bothered them more than they expected. Respect that was a foreign language to them. One biker behind the leader snorted loudly. "Listen to Grandpa Wisdom here. Respect. Next he'll start preaching." Another added mockingly, "Yeah, teach us a lesson, old man. We love life advice." They surrounded him now. A circle of intimidation, boots scuffed against asphalt, fingers cracked knuckles, rings glinted under dull lights. A few engines revved again, louder, harsher, like thunder, threatening rain. Inside the diner, someone whispered, "Call the police." Someone else replied quietly, "No, police won't get here fast enough." But Chuck remained steady. There was not a single tremor in his posture. No panic in his breathing. He didn't back down. He didn't step forward. He simply stood. That alone made some of them uneasy. The leader lifted his chin. "Last chance, Grandpa, show some respect. Bow your head. Admit you were wrong to ignore us." Or what? A quiet voice inside the diner murmured. Or what indeed? Chuck's calm gaze shifted slightly, observing the gang not with fear but with clarity. The kind that comes from experience, discipline, and a life built on facing danger without letting it change who you are. He spoke again, voice low, patient, almost gentle. "Respect isn't forced," he said, "and it isn't about who's louder or who has the biggest engines or who scares the most people. Real respect comes from how you treat others, especially those who can't fight back." The leader let out a sharp laugh. "You hear that, boys?" he shouted. "We've got ourselves a philosopher." Laughter erupted. But deep inside, a strange tension formed. Because truth, no matter how mocked, has a way of landing. A few of the younger bikers hesitated. Their eyes flickered with uncertainty. Something about the man in front of them didn't feel right, or rather, didn't feel normal. He wasn't scared. He wasn't angry. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He simply was. Unshaken, unmoved, unintimidated. And nothing is more threatening to bullies than someone who won't give them the reaction they crave. The leader stepped back slightly, then smiled slowly, dangerously. "Well then," he said, cracking his neck, "let's see how much you believe in respect when respect isn't returned." And with that, the line between intimidation and confrontation began to blur. The air thickened. Hearts raced inside the diner. Phones were raised, recording. The night sky seemed to hold its breath, because the bikers thought they were about to teach an old man a lesson. But in reality, they were about to learn one themselves. The night air seemed to tighten as the leader rolled his shoulders, his grin widening like someone about to enjoy a cruel game. Gravel crunched beneath heavy boots as the gang tightened their circle around Chuck Norris, forming a wall of leather, ink, and arrogance. The neon diner sign buzzed above, like a nervous heartbeat, while distant traffic faded into silence. Every eye was locked on the scene unfolding. A storm gathering around a man who stood as calm as a still lake. "Let's make something clear," the leader said, voice low, almost playful, as if he were explaining rules to a child. "We don't like people who think they're better than us." "I never said I was," Chuck replied gently. "That's the problem," the biker snapped, stepping closer. "You act like you don't even need to say anything." The others chuckled darkly. They enjoyed dominance. They thrived on reactions. They wanted fear. But this man refused to give it. And the more calm he stayed, the more shaken they felt, though not one of them would ever admit it. One of the younger bikers couldn't help himself. He stepped forward and flicked Chuck's collar. "He's not scared. I think he needs a reminder why he should be." The leader didn't stop him. That was the moment the situation truly crossed the line. Inside the diner, a woman clasped her hands near her lips. The cook leaned against the counter, frowning. A little boy sitting by the window whispered to his mother, "Why isn't he scared?" She had no answer. Chuck's eyes didn't flare with anger. They didn't even harden. Instead, there was disappointment. the look of someone who had seen arrogance destroy far too many lives. "You don't want to do this," he said softly, not as a threat, but as advice. The biker scoffed. "You going to stop me?" It was meant to be mocking. It came out nervous. But pride is louder than wisdom. He reached again, this time shoving Chuck's shoulder. And it happened. Not violence. Not rage. Not chaos. Control. In one fluid, impossibly fast movement, Chuck shifted his weight, guiding the biker's arm downward with precision. No force wasted, no anger used, just technique. The biker found himself off balance, stumbling to a knee before he even realized what had happened. Gasps erupted. Not a punch thrown, not a strike landed. Just skill, undeniable, clean and real. The gang froze. The leader's grin faded. The biker who had lunged stood slowly, stunned not by pain, but by humiliation. What? What was that? Chuck gently released his arm. "That was me giving you a chance not to get hurt." Silence, real silence. The kind that humbles. The bravado cracked. "Boss," one biker whispered, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "He's not normal." The leader clenched his jaw. His pride couldn't accept it. This wasn't how their stories usually went. People shouted, people begged, people ran. They didn't stay still. They didn't remain calm, and they certainly didn't handle his men with that kind of quiet precision. He stepped closer, face inches from Chuck's. "Who do you think you are?" Chuck didn't answer. He didn't need to. The leader shoved him harder now. A challenge, a demand, an invitation to chaos. But instead of backing down, Chuck remained as rooted as stone. His balance didn't shift. His expression didn't change. It wasn't aggression. It was unwavering steadiness. The kind that only comes from a lifetime of discipline. Another biker lunged, swinging instinctively, more from panic than power. What followed wasn't a brawl. It was a demonstration. A hand guided. A wrist redirected. A simple movement, perfectly timed. The biker stumbled past, losing momentum, stopping only because the ground caught him. No broken bones, no brutal strikes, just pure skill denying violence its chance to exist. Murmurs broke through the gang now. "Boss, I don't think." "He's not. This guy's different." The leader snapped his head toward them. "Shut up." His pride burned hotter than reason now. This wasn't about control anymore. This was about ego, a dangerous fuel. He stepped back, cracking his knuckles. But behind the fury, doubt finally crept into his eyes. Chuck looked at him calmly. "This doesn't have to go any further. Walk away, take your men, be better than this moment." The words hit harder than any strike, because they weren't spoken like a threat. They were spoken like wisdom. And wisdom scares pride more than pain ever could. The leader inhaled deeply, fists trembling. His men watched him, waiting. Their power rested in his reaction. If he backed down, he'd lose face. If he pushed forward, he risked losing much more. He took a step anyway. Ego made the decision, not sense. The wind grew colder, the air heavier. Every watching heart beat faster. The line had officially been crossed. The bikers thought they were about to break an old man's pride. But slowly, painfully, they were realizing something terrifying. They weren't standing in front of weakness. They were standing in front of discipline, shaped into human form. And discipline does not bend easily. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, like even the wind was waiting to see what would happen next. The leader's fists tightened, his jaw grinding as if every ounce of pride inside him screamed to prove something. Around him, the gang stood restless, unsure for the first time in a long time. Their confidence, once loud and roaring, now flickered like a weak flame in a storm. Inside the diner, everyone was frozen in uneasy suspense. The waitress who had been watching pressed a trembling hand to her chest. The cook leaned closer to the window, his brows knit tight. A man whispered, "This is going to get ugly." But another, older gentleman shook his head slowly. "Watch closely," he murmured. "That man knows what he's doing." Outside, the tension thickened. The leader stepped forward again, anger pulsing in every movement. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he snarled. "You embarrass my men. You stand there like you're untouchable. You think this is funny? Chuck Norris didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture or glare. He simply looked at the man with calm, steady eyes, the kind that carried more power than any threat. "There's nothing funny about arrogance," he replied quietly, "and there's nothing strong about bullying strangers." That sentence cut deeper than any punch. The gang shifted uncomfortably. A few of them, just for a split second, felt like kids being corrected, not warriors being challenged. Because the truth in those words didn't just land, it echoed. The leader hated it. He lunged forward. It wasn't a cautious move, it wasn't thought through. It was raw frustration wrapped in instinct. His arm shot toward Chuck in a reckless attempt to grab and dominate him. The same move that probably worked on dozens of frightened people before. But fear wasn't here tonight. Technique was. Chuck's body reacted not with force but with flow. The graceful precision of a man who understood control better than chaos. His hand moved in an almost gentle arc, redirecting the leader's momentum, guiding his wrist downward and to the side. The biker stumbled, losing balance, not because he was weak, but because Chuck understood leverage like a musician understands melody. Gasps rippled across the lot. The diners inside pressed closer to the glass. The leader staggered, catching himself before hitting the ground, his pride far more bruised than his body. One biker muttered, disbelief dripping from every word. "Did you see that? He didn't even hit him. It didn't make sense to them. No punches, no brutality, yet somehow absolute control." The leader turned back, embarrassment burning like fire under his skin. His men were watching. The town was watching. Cameras were being raised. He could feel humiliation clawing at him, more painful than any strike. "I'm giving you every chance to stop this," Chuck said, voice steady. Not warning, not threatening, simply offering a path that still had dignity left on it. "Walk away before someone gets hurt, before you make a mistake that follows you for years." But pride is a dangerous cage, and the leader had locked himself inside. He roared in frustration and charged again. Bigger, louder, angrier, like a wave crashing wildly against a rock, hoping sheer force would make up for lack of control. It didn't. In one flawless motion, Chuck stepped aside, redirected his arm, and guided him down once more. This time firmly, not violently, but decisively. The leader hit the pavement on one knee, breath knocked out of him, stunned that his strength meant so little here. The gang stood stunned. He wasn't beating them. He was outclassing them, not with fists, not with rage, but with discipline. The irony was brutal. The man they mocked for being calm was the only one truly in control. "Boss." One biker whispered nervously, "Stop. He knows what he's doing." Another swallowed hard. "He's trained. Like seriously trained." The realization finally began to dawn on them. They weren't dealing with luck. They weren't dealing with some stubborn old man. They were dealing with skill beyond anything they'd ever faced. The leader looked up slowly, breathing hard, anger shaking in every muscle. But behind that rage now sat fear. Not fear of pain, fear of being wrong, fear of being small, fear of being the bully who finally met someone who couldn't be bullied. Chuck extended a hand toward him, not to strike, but to help him up. That single gesture stunned everyone more than the display of skill. He didn't humiliate him. He didn't taunt him. He didn't even smirk. He offered respect to someone who had shown him none. The leader stared at the hand as if it burned. His pride screamed at him not to take it. His ego raged like wildfire, but his humanity, buried beneath years of roughness and bravado, flickered slowly, uncertainly. He took the hand. Chuck helped him to his feet. A hush fell over the entire parking lot, because in that moment something shifted. The energy changed. This wasn't a fight anymore. This wasn't about domination. This was about realization. The gang members stood silently now, their earlier arrogance washed away by something new, respect. And maybe quietly, shame. For the first time, they weren't looking at Chuck like a target. They were looking at him like a mirror. A reflection of everything they weren't: control instead of chaos. Strength without cruelty, power without ego. Inside the diner, someone whispered, "He could have destroyed them, but he didn't." another replied softly. And that's what makes him dangerous and incredible. The leader opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Because what do you say? When the man you tried to humiliate just taught you a lesson without hurting you? What do you say when strength refuses to prove itself through violence? What do you say when you finally realize you picked the wrong man to test? And standing there, shaken yet humbled, the gang, and everyone watching, began to understand. This wasn't about a fight anymore. This was about character. And character had already won. The parking lot felt different now. The roar of engines, the laughter, the bravado, all of it had faded into a stunned silence. The bikers who once stood tall and fearless now shifted uneasily, their confidence unraveling thread by thread. The leader stared at his own hands as if they'd betrayed him, struggling to understand how a calm, quiet stranger had controlled him so effortlessly. And then, the diner door burst open. A breathless man hurried out. The diner owner, wiping his hands on his apron, eyes wide with panic and disbelief. "Stop," he shouted, rushing toward them. "Stop everything. Do you all have any idea what you're doing?" The gang jolted at the thunder in his voice. The leader frowned, irritation flashing in the cracks of his shaken pride. "Relax, old man. We had it under." "No," the owner snapped, pointing straight at Chuck. "You didn't have it under anything. You were seconds away from getting yourselves into the worst mistake of your lives." Several bikers exchanged confused looks. The younger ones glanced anxiously toward their leader. The air thickened again, but not with the tension of violence this time, with the weight of truth. The owner took a step closer, staring at Chuck with awe, respect, and a little disbelief that the man himself had walked into his little roadside diner. "I didn't see it at first. But when you moved, when you controlled them without hurting them, I knew." He turned slowly to face the bikers, voice firm and ringing with finality. "That man is Chuck Norris." The name didn't explode. It sank, like thunder rolling beneath the ground. For a moment, the gang stood frozen, as if the world itself needed time to process the sentence. Then one biker blinked, another gulped. Someone whispered, "No way!" Another breathed out, "You're kidding." They looked again, really looked. The calm eyes, the disciplined posture, the quiet presence that didn't demand respect, but commanded it anyway. Recognition began to dawn. The legend, the martial artist whose name turned into jokes, not because he was weak, but because the world needed humor to wrap around the reality of his strength. The champion, the black belt, the man known not just for power, but for character. The leader swallowed hard, his bravado evaporating under the weight of realization. "That's him," he whispered. The owner nodded. "Multiple time world champion, black belt. Trained warriors, soldiers, champions, a lifetime of discipline. That's who you tried to bully." The parking lot fell completely silent. The bikers weren't laughing now. They weren't smirking. They were standing face to face with living proof that real strength didn't need to roar. It didn't need to flash muscles. It didn't need to threaten. It just was. One of the younger bikers lowered his eyes, shame creeping across his face. "We didn't know," he murmured. Chuck's voice cut through softly, not cold, not harsh, simply honest. "That's the problem," he said. "You shouldn't need to know someone's name to respect them." Those words didn't strike like a punch. They landed like truth, the kind that sits deep and uncomfortable. Pride wanted to fight back. Pride wanted an excuse. Pride wanted to say something, anything, to save his image. But for the first time in a long time, pride had nothing to say. He lifted his eyes to Chuck, and for the first time, there was no arrogance behind them, only realization. We've dealt with punks, wannabes, tough guys," he muttered. "People who fold fast. People who talk loud with nothing behind them." He hesitated, swallowing the bitterness of humility. "We've never faced someone like you." Chuck shook his head slowly. "You haven't faced someone like respect," he corrected gently. "You've spent so long trying to scare the world into fearing you. You forgot what real strength looks like." He gestured toward the diner windows. "Strength is the father eating dinner with his family, after working 10 hours. Strength is the waitress who keeps smiling even when the day is rough. Strength is the people you walked in here and tried to intimidate, just because you could. Each word landed heavy, each truth stripped away a layer of bravado. The leader looked back at his men, and for the first time since they arrived, they didn't look powerful. They looked human, humbled, exposed, and maybe ready to hear something they'd never had the courage to face. Chuck continued, voice steady, almost gentle now. Power isn't in how loud your engines roar. It isn't in how many people you scare. Power is responsibility. Power is control. Power is knowing you can hurt someone. He paused, and choosing not to. The gang stood silent. The leader's shoulders slowly dropped. The anger in his eyes faded, replaced by something unfamiliar, respect. Real respect. Not forced, not demanded, earned. He finally spoke, and there was no swagger left in his voice. I was wrong. The admission stunned his own men more than anything that had happened earlier. For a leader like him to say that meant something had truly shattered inside, and something better was trying to grow in its place. He looked Chuck straight in the eyes. I disrespected you. I disrespected everyone here, and I acted like power meant fear. He took a breath. But tonight, you showed us what real power is. Not awkward, not tense, meaningful. A silence of understanding. The kind that doesn't erase the past, but begins to rewrite the future. The bikers, one by one, lowered their heads, not because they were defeated, but because for the first time they finally understood what it meant to be strong. A strange calm settled over the parking lot, like the storm had finally exhaled. The tension that once strangled the air softened into something almost peaceful. The bikers, who had arrived like a thundercloud ready to swallow everything beneath it, now stood quieter than the wind itself. No roaring engines, no mocking laughter, just silence and reflection. The leader stood face to face with Chuck Norris, the weight of his choices heavy in his chest. His fists, once symbols of intimidation, now simply hung at his sides. For the first time in years, they weren't tools of fear. They were reminders of responsibility. I'm sorry, he said again. This time not just to save face, but because he meant it. The words didn't come out loud. They came out honest. I've spent so long proving I'm the toughest guy in any place I walk into that I forgot why I even wanted respect in the first place. His men watched quietly. They'd seen their leader angry. They'd seen him cruel. They'd seen him unbeatable. They had never seen him humble. Chuck didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He didn't use this moment to crush what little pride remained in them. Instead, he nodded slowly, as if acknowledging not the apology, but the change beginning behind it. Everyone makes mistakes, Chuck said calmly, but real strength is admitting them and choosing not to repeat them. The leader swallowed hard. You could have destroyed us, he said almost in disbelief. You could have humiliated us. You could have taught us a lesson the painful way. Chuck shook his head. Pain teaches fast, he replied, but wisdom stays longer. The words lingered. Inside the diner, relief washed over the watching crowd. Shoulders dropped. People finally breathed again. The waitress wiped her eyes without realizing tears had formed. The cook muttered under his breath, "Thank God." A child pressed his palms to the glass with awe, staring not at a fighter, but at a hero. The leader turned back to his men. For the first time in a long time, he didn't bark orders. He didn't yell. He didn't assert dominance. He simply spoke like a man who'd seen himself clearly and didn't entirely like what he saw. We scared these people, he said quietly. We walked in like we owned the place. We insulted them. We laughed at them, and for what? To feel powerful. His voice cracked slightly. That's not power. That's weakness pretending to be strong. His men shifted, shame creeping into their expressions. The younger ones especially seemed affected, because beneath the leather jackets and noise, many of them were still just lost men trying to feel important. Chuck watched silently, not judging, simply letting them confront the truth themselves. The leader turned back toward the diner and took a slow breath. We owe them an apology, he said. That sentence alone felt heavier than any punch thrown that night. He walked toward the diner door. Every step felt like swallowing pride. Step by step, he opened the door. The bell rang softly. All eyes turned. The bikers followed him inside, not stomping, not laughing, not towering over people, but standing quieter, smaller, more human. The leader removed his sunglasses and spoke, voice steady. "I'm sorry," he said to the room. "To every one of you. We disrespected you. We scared you. That wasn't strength. That was ego, and tonight, we got reminded how small ego really is." The room stayed silent, not out of fear now, but out of shock. Real apologies are rare. Honest ones are even rarer. He turned to the waitress, the one who had nearly cried earlier. "You didn't deserve that," he said softly. "None of you did." Then he did something no one expected. He pulled out his wallet and placed a large stack of bills on the counter. "For every meal we ruined, for every second of fear we caused, dinner's on us." A wave of stunned whispers swept through the diner. The cook stared, the families blinked, the child smiled. Then slowly, the tension broke. A few people nodded. A couple of them even clapped softly. Not out of mockery, out of respect. Because humility, when real, is powerful. The leader turned back toward Chuck. "I don't know if we deserve forgiveness," he admitted, "but thank you for not becoming what we were." Chuck nodded once. "You don't deserve forgiveness," he said honestly. "Forgiveness is something you earn, the same way respect is earned, and tonight, you took the first step." Those words didn't excuse them, they challenged them. And that's what real guidance looks like. The bikers walked back outside slowly, not as conquerors, but as men trying to be better than the ones who rode in. Before leaving, the leader paused. "Thank you," he said again. Chuck simply replied, "Remember this night, not because you lost, but because you learned." The engine started again, but this time, they didn't sound like monsters roaring. They sounded lighter. As the bikes disappeared into the night, the parking lot felt peaceful again. People slowly returned to their meals, conversations buzzing with relief, gratitude, and awe. The diner owner turned to Chuck, voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just stop a fight," he said softly. "You changed people tonight." Chuck simply smiled. "I didn't change them," he replied. "They changed when they realized who they really wanted to be." And with that, he walked quietly to his car, the same calm, humble figure he had been from the beginning. No victory speech, no spotlight. Just quiet strength, leaving behind a lesson stronger than any punch. A reminder that true power isn't about winning battles. It's about preventing them. It's about teaching. It's about choosing character, even when ego screams louder. And as he drove away, the night didn't feel dangerous anymore. It felt wiser. The highway outside the bar was quieter now, washed in the fading gold of evening light. Dust still floated lazily in the air like it hadn't yet realized the chaos was over. The bikers, humbled and changed, stood together in silence, each of them absorbing what had just happened. They hadn't just encountered a man, they had encountered a lesson. And lessons like this didn't fade with daylight. They stayed burned into your character forever. Chuck Norris stood near the bikes with his arms gently crossed. Not like a conqueror who had defeated enemies, but like a mentor who had helped misguided students find their way back. There was no arrogance in his stance, no prideful smirk, just calm strength and a presence that felt larger than the open sky above them. The leader of the bikers, once loud, once boastful, now stepped forward slowly. His boots scraped against the pavement, but this time there was no swagger in his walk, only sincerity. "I've spent my whole life thinking power meant fear," he said, voice low and honest. "That respect meant people stepping aside when I walked in today. You proved me wrong." Chuck gave a faint nod, the kind that said, "I hear you, but keep going." "I never thought for a second about the people I scared. I never cared about how smaller folks felt when we rolled through their towns because I thought that made me strong." The biker exhaled deeply, like he was releasing years of built-up ego with that breath. "But watching you, the way you didn't humiliate us even though you could have destroyed us, that took more strength than any punch." A few of the other bikers nodded. One of them wiped his face, embarrassed by the emotion he wasn't used to feeling in public. Another stared at the sunset like he was seeing color for the first time. This wasn't just a moment. This was transformation. Chuck finally spoke, voice steady, warm, and grounded. "Power doesn't make you strong," he said. "Control does. Discipline does. Respect does. Anyone can swing a fist, but it takes a real warrior to choose not to." The wind rustled quietly through their jackets, as if even nature paused to listen. "You carry a reputation," Chuck continued. "And reputations spread. You can choose what kind of reputation you want. Do you want people to fear the sound of your engines, or feel safe knowing the people riding them stand for honor?" It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a lecture. It was an invitation to become better men. The leader swallowed and nodded slowly. "We'll change," he said firmly. "Not just today because you're Chuck Norris, but because you reminded us of the men we should have been long ago." One of the younger bikers stepped forward, tears barely hidden. "Sir, I got into this life looking for belonging, looking for strength, but I lost who I was. Thank you for reminding me we can rewrite who we are." Chuck smiled softly. "It's never too late to start doing the right thing. The only time it becomes too late is when you stop trying." The gang tossed their old attitudes into the wind like ashes of a past they no longer wanted. The bar, once filled with loud swagger and destructive pride, suddenly seemed like a place that had witnessed something holy, something healing. A little boy who had watched everything from the roadside tugged at his mother's hand. "Mom," he whispered, eyes shining with admiration. "I want to be strong like him when I grow up." His mother smiled. "Then remember what you saw today. Real strength protects. It doesn't hurt." Chuck turned toward his pickup truck, the setting sun outlining him like a silhouette carved from courage itself. He didn't leave with cheers. He didn't leave with applause. He left the way real heroes do, quietly, without needing praise. The engines of the bikes eventually roared to life again. But this time the sound felt different. Not threatening, not intimidating. It felt like thunder after rain, loud but clean, powerful but controlled. And as Chuck drove off down the endless stretch of highway, he left behind something far more valuable than fear. He left behind change. He left behind respect. He left behind a reminder that legends aren't defined by how hard they hit. They're defined by how wisely they don't. So remember this wherever you are watching from. Strength isn't measured by how many people kneel before you. It's measured by how many people stand taller because of you. If you believe true power lies in humility, discipline, and respect, type respect in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from, because today, we honor not just Chuck Norris, but every person choosing to be stronger, kinder, and better than they were yesterday.